Hello, good day to all of you, my dear friends. After a long time since my Golang tutorials, I am meeting you now with something interesting. For those who missed and interested to watch my Golang tutorials, please check the reference link given above. Okay, coming to the point. While doing the Golang tutorials, the whole bunch of tutorial videos are recorded and presented to you from my Ubuntu desktop. I really enjoyed writing the code, compiling, executing, and recording in Ubuntu operating system. For your information, Ubuntu is a Linux variant. It's a Linux operating system. Okay, 2 decades before, after my schooling, I remember, like many of you, I started my journey with the computers through Windows operating system. It went well, but after 5 years, I felt the pressure of commercial entanglements towards proprietary operating systems, softwares, antivirus programs, device drivers, license over the operating systems, etc. I think this was by the time when Windows XP 2000 server were dominating the market. One gentleman introduced me to the world of Unix Linux operating systems, and I got my first non-Windows experience with Redhat Linux 6 and 7. That was the main Linux operating system available at the time for public. At first, the shift looked crazy for me. I was all in search of C drive, D drive, CD and floppy drives, control panel, command prompt, and whatnot. All the Windows related things which were into my mind that I was looking for in the Linux operating system. But then I came to know about that Unix file system and started using it. Eventually, as days rolled by, I got addicted to it. Now it is almost more than 15 years since my first encounter with Linux, and I never ever repented or looked back towards Windows or even any other proprietary operating systems. I would like to stress here and say that Windows is an excellent operating system, absolutely no doubt about that. But my attempt here is to give you the taste of something extraordinary. It may not be a monotonous Windows operating system for you. It will unlock some excitements for you. Right. I'm sure, like me, many of you are currently sticking with some operating system and bound to its commercial entanglements. I believe you might be eagerly looking forward and interested to shifting your gears to experiment something new. Don't worry, I am here to assist you. I am not a Linux wizard who knows the nook and corner of the operating system and doing great wonders with the Linux OS. There are a lot of brilliant YouTubers with amazing Linux videos as such, but I can pitch into a space which is not explored by many of the Linux enthusiasts, where we can hold your hands and introduce you to the exciting place of the operating system, exciting world of the new Linux operating system. Right. Linux has tens and hundreds of distributions with different look and feel, package managers, fantastic applications on their own. In this series, in this series, I will start with an introduction to Linux for new users, especially for Windows users, and we will explore varieties of Linux distributions each in forthcoming videos. The main intention behind this attempt is to fill up the gaps which I faced during my initial periods of shifting to Linux. Subscribe this channel to keep yourself in loop without missing any videos. All the best for your fantastic Linux experience. To begin with, I don't have a studio setup, higher end cameras with great resolutions, and good microphones with noise cancellation mechanisms to shoot these videos. Tried my maximum possible to achieve the good quality with my available headphones and microphone. Please comment and let me know at places wherever I failed to convey either visually or audibly. Your valuable comments will help me a lot to provide better content packed videos. Right. Today, the first video of this series will be an introduction to Linux for Windows users. Going forward, we will be unfolding the wonders of various Linux distributions. Let's get started and look at the minimal basic things in Linux that should be known to a Windows user. Right. So I'm just going to use a text editor in order to write something for you to present visually. So this is my operating system desktop. It is an Ubuntu operating system which is a flavor of Linux. So it's a variant of Linux Debian flavor. So this is the operating system I use as my primary now. This is known as Ubuntu operating system. Right. So now I am going to open a document writer. I will increase the font size for better readability. Yeah, right. So this video, I'm just going to give you very basic introduction for the comparison between Windows and Linux operating systems. There are huge set of differences, but I am going to touch up only the basic things which are needed for you to get started or get started towards shifting from Windows to Linux. This shift should not be a surprise for you and it should be very pleasant and smooth. That's the main reason behind this videos, right? So for those Windows users, you might be already known that the entire Windows file system organization is being organized with drives, C drive, D drive, E drive, etc. And also whenever you add a new CD drive or USB, it is also being recognized as drives after your partitions. This is how we identified files in terms of drives, right? Whereas in Linux operating system, all the data, all the files, all the devices, everything is listed under slash. So C drive, D drive, E drive are the partition roots in Windows operating system, whereas in Linux, everything rolls back to the common root, which is called as slash. So this slash is the root for the entire Linux ecosystem or the Linux operating system and its file organization. So all the devices, all the data or all the directories you are creating will go only under this particular slash, which is called as root. Okay, so how the file system in Linux looks like. In Windows, you already know you are having drives. Under the drives, you have subdirectories. Under the subdirectories, you used to have files. So the subdirectories and files are very much common in Linux, which is more similar to Windows, but the organization of drives will be like C, D, E, F, like that in Windows, whereas in Linux, everything is organized and rolled back towards the root directory or the slash directory, right? So in order to know the Linux file system, there are some folders or some directories available under the root, which needs to be known very well. The first important thing to be known is slash, which is the root directory for the Linux operating system. The next important is slash root and slash home. In Linux, there are two types of users available. Of course, in Windows, we used to find regular users and administrators. Similar to this, in Linux, we have it is a multi-user operating system, so we have the classification of users as regular users and administrators. The same classification is available here as well, but the file system recognizes regular users with the folder home under the root directory. This slash home contains all the regular user files, whereas slash root contains all the root user files. So root user is nothing but an administrator. In Linux, administrator users are called as root users. Apart from that, we have very minute micro level permission configurations available in Linux. In Windows, we used to have read, write, and executable accessible for the users, whereas in Linux there are various levels, directory level, group level, and lot more things are there. I don't want to get much more deeper into that aspect, but this is just to give you an idea. There are two types of users available in Linux as well. One is the root user, another one is regular users. Slash root is the directory which contains all the root user files. Slash home is the directory which contains all the regular user files. Right. Next, come to the command prompt. So in Windows, if you want to invoke your command prompt, what you used to do? You will type command. If you are using older Windows versions, CMD, which is the latest Windows flavors. That is Windows 2000, maybe in Windows XP and all, we used to type CMD. For Windows 95 and 98, I remember command. You need to type, then only the command prompt will be coming up. Okay. So for Linux, we used to have something, the command prompt can be called as terminal. So we can invoke the terminal with the key combination Control plus Alt plus T. I remember. I will just show you by hitting the Control Alt T. Look here. This is the typical Linux terminal. It is more like command prompt. So you can type dir and all other stuff. Okay. I'm closing the command for now. So like Windows command prompts, we can have command prompts in Linux as well using the Control Alt T. Or you can just open and type terminal. So that will open up the terminal. In almost all the Linux flavors have the same rules and regulations. Okay. There is one more thing called prompt classifications for users. In Linux, all the root users are having hash prompts, whereas all the regular users are having the dollar prompt. So by looking up on the prompt itself, we can identify whether the user is a root user or an administrator or they are a normal users. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of it. I am opening the terminal by hitting Ctrl Alt T. You can look the terminal here. In this particular prompt, you can see the dollar symbol. That means the user in which I logged into my current machine is a regular user. If there is a hash symbol you can find here, that means I am an administrator or the root user. So that's how the user classification in terms of prompts can be seen in Linux terminal. So this is one of the important thing to be noted. So that is for the prompts. Okay. In Windows, the user home directory, that is the user directory, can be found by default in C colon drive, that is C drive, users, and your username slash desktop and all other files which you deal with, right? Similar to this, in Linux, the user directory can be seen slash under slash home slash username slash desktop, etc. So as I mentioned above, in Linux, slash home is the directory which contains all the regular user files. So slash home slash username slash the user files will have the entire list of user related stuff. So this is the main difference between the Windows and Linux in terms of user directory organization, right? And one more thing is, whenever you want to install a software in Windows, what we used to do, we used to go to control panel. In the control panel, we have add or remove programs, right? So using which we can install a new program or we can uninstall whatever already installed, right? But in case of Linux, we have some dedicated package managers. So these package managers helps us to install or remove the softwares in the machine. Right. Windows is a proprietary operating system with various versions. Right. So we have varieties of versions for Windows 95, 98, XP, 2000 and Windows 7, Windows 8, and now it is Windows 10, and maybe something in future. But the basic core will be the Windows operating system over which varieties of versions of Windows are being loaded. So where we have various versions keep on rolling or released by the Microsoft ecosystem. That's how the operating system is getting evolved. Whereas in Linux, we have varieties of flavors. It is not a particular operating system. It is a free of cost. It available for the public totally free with various flavors of Linux. So some of the famous flavors of Linux are Debian, and we have Redhat and Gentoo Linux and Archlinux. So these are all some famous classifications of Linux flavors under which lot of Linux distributions have been released. So everything is have its own separate look and feel, its own separate style of operating system organization, but everything falls under the same Linux file system under the root directory, home, users, etc. So the major difference here is a single operating system with varieties of versions is there in Windows, whereas in Linux you have many operating systems with many distributions with many flavors. That too, each and every flavor get evolved with varieties of versions. So the sky is the limit in order to explore all possible Linux distributions or Linux flavors. Some famous flavors are listed here like Debian, Red Hat, Gentoo, and Archlinux. Right. As I said, like in Windows, we have control panel to add or remove programs, right? Similarly, Linux has package managers. These package managers differs from Linux distribution to distribution because in Debian there is a way to install packages, whereas in Red Hat that will be a separate way. We cannot follow the same way. In Gentoo, that is also a separate mechanism. So every separate Linux distribution has its own package manager. So the package manager should be known while installing the Linux operating system. If you are installing a Debian variant, you need to know about the package manager of the Debian. Similar to this, we need to know how to add and remove softwares or programs in separate Linux distributions individually. It is a very simple thing. As we progress in the tutorials in forthcoming videos, I will keep you posted about the package managers of the corresponding distributions. Right. So that is about the basic understanding of the difference between Linux and Windows organization. Now, let us get a bit deeper into the file system. Already we have seen three file directory structures. One is the root directory, another one is the root directory for root user files, another one is the home directory for regular user files. Apart from this, we have something called etc. The etc contains system-wide configuration files for all your user related operations across the operating systems. There is one more thing called /var. This contains system wide log files. So whenever a command or a program corrupted or exited unexpectedly, you can feel free to go and check /var folder under which you can find the log files and you can identify the reason. So this is a very important organization /var and /etc. And one more important thing is /boot. So this is very much important to boot the operating system. So all the system files required to boot Linux OS is there. In Windows, we used to have C drive Windows folder which contains some of the system files like autoexec.bat, system.ini and lot more things, right? Because booting is a process of loading the operating system into main memory, which is the RAM, right? So the same process is happening in Linux, but it has its own system files. Those system files are residing inside the slash boot folder. So that folder also very much important for us to know, because we are not going to work anywhere in that particular folder that is dedicated for system usage for booting the files. If we are unknowingly, if you touch the folder and corrupt some of the files, the operating system may remain unusable or it may tend to crash. So be very careful while dealing with the file system. You are only supposed to use slash home or slash root based on your permissions or the nature of the user you are using. Occasionally we use etc and var, but we won't touch slash boot or the root directory at any cost whenever we deal with the operating system. Okay, so this is about the file system. Next, I just wanted to give you a simple idea about how a typical Linux architecture looks, the Linux operating system, how it looks like, that I want to provide you. So I'm going to use a clicky paint tool in order to explain you something. This is a nice simple tool which I can use. Yep. So the entire Linux architecture revolves around the central core hardware we have in our machine. As I said, all the hardwares in our machine like monitor, keyboard, printers, disk drives, everything we connected are not devices. They were simply files in Linux. So every hardware is being represented in terms of files. Next to the hardware tier, there is some special abstraction or covering which is called as kernel. This is the heart of the operating system. The entire Linux system is revolving around the kernel. What this kernel does is it contains some special type of programs called kernel modules. What this kernel modules does, it receives the commands and communicates with the hardware. So the kernel module is the sensitive and most important part of any Linux or Unix based operating system. So kernel is the tier which covers the hardware and interacts directly with the hardware. The next abstraction provided over kernel is called as shell. The shell is nothing but a command interpreter. So the shell receives the command from user execution and interprets the command, identify that relevant kernel module and passes the command to the kernel module. Then the kernel communicates with the hardware and gets the data for you. So shell works as an interpreter or an intermediate tier between the user and the kernel. So there are varieties of shells available in Linux or Unix ecosystem. We call as K shell, C shell, Bourne shell, R shell, that is remote shell. There are varieties of shells particularly meant for the purpose or the need in which we are using them. I don't want to get much more deeper into the shells, but it's enough for you to know that shell is a command interpreter which acts in between the user's commands and the heart of the operating system, which is the kernel. Right. After the shell, there is the outermost layer where we have our softwares and everything installed, or we directly interact with this particular layer which is called applications. So this is the place where we install all our applications. So once we install the applications, whenever we try to run the application, it directly invokes a shell command. It then interprets and transfers the user request to the hardware via the kernel module. then it returns the data back to the user. So at the end of the application, there are various users sitting and sending the commands and receiving the data. So users are sitting outside the Linux architecture and communicates with the Linux to get the all the set of data. So applications is the way in which the user deals with the Linux system architecture. So this is the structure of a typical Linux operating system. Not only Linux, all the Unix based operating systems undergo this particular structure. Okay. Having said this, this is a very basic standard information that everyone should know before getting into the Linux operating system. Okay. As I said earlier, among the interesting Linux variants, some are popular like Debian, Redhat, Archlinux, Gentoo, etc. Right? So we are going to see them one by one in the upcoming videos individually, with much more details like installation, their look and feel, some cool features inside them, their usability, etc. Stay tuned for the upcoming videos. I will keep on posting and exploring all the Linux variants one by one. Until then, take care, stay safe, and feel free to explore the vast Linux space. Have fun. See you.